Hello everyone, thanks for coming today. As you all know, I'll be mostly talking about planetary magic. So one of Aleister Crowley's most popular definitions of magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. The knowing and accomplishment of will never come without toil and self-discipline. Eliphas Levi states in The Key of Mysteries that the human will develops itself and increases itself by its own activity. Levi also lets us know that the glyph of the bearded demon Baphomet is attributed to the accomplishment of the great work, and we could easily spend all day talking about just this topic. He also felt the need to quote the Bible to really hammer this point home at this point in the book, in the mind of the reader. I would that thou wert cold or hot, but because thee art lukewarm, I will spew thee out of my mouth. Revelation chapter 3, verses 15 to 16. For this reason, it seems that the greatest evil is not evil, but inaction and stagnation. It is without a doubt in my mind that ceremonial magic and yoga speed up this change that is crucial in our lives, and today we'll be focusing on planetary magic. What is planetary magic? The art of invoking or evoking or directing forces which are associated with the 7 planetary forces: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sol, Venus, Mercury, and Luna. Some magicians may work with other planetary forces which are considered higher octaves, but for our purposes, we're going to discuss the 7 traditional planets as they are associated with the 7 days of the week and the sephiroth and the Tree of Life. More particularly, though, we'll be talking a little bit more about the calling forth of the God name, the archangel, the choir of angels, and the heavens of these 7 planets, which correspond to the 7 days of the week. Kabbalistically, these spheres are hierarchical. The angels or emanations of God are not all created equal. There is clearly a chain of command. The 7 days of the week are Monday, that day attributes to the moon; Tuesday, that day attributes to Mars; Wednesday to Mercury; Thursday to Jupiter; and Friday to Venus; Saturday to Saturn; and Sunday the Sun. Magical correspondences. Thanks. The table of magical correspondences is a list of magical correspondences between items belonging to different categories, such as correspondences between certain deities, angels, heavenly bodies, plants, perfumes, precious stones, etc. Such lists were compiled by 19th century occultists like Samuel Liddell Mathers and William Wynne Westcott, both members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, who in the 1890s prepared a manuscript called the Book of the Correspondences. The manuscript was later worked by Aleister Crowley, who anonymously published it in 1909 as Liber 777. These tablets of correspondences were meant to be used in a ceremonial context where specific magical objects were assigned to specific deities or Kabbalistic emanations. It's suggested in Liber O that a student has attained some accomplishment of asana, pranayama, and dharana before performing greater evocations. It also states that a student should have committed to memory many columns of correspondences which relate directly to the spheres of Bina down to Yesod that we're going to be talking about today. So from here to there, in that order. If this seems intimidating, all these correspondences, all this memorizing, I wouldn't worry. There are ways to begin the process and the journey of planetary magic, adding layer upon layer, starting a little bit more simply, and by default, all these correspondences will become committed to memory. It's inevitable. So let's take a look at the 7 planets and some, but not all, of their correspondences. So Monday, the day of the moon, which you'll see the sephiroth attributed to that called Yesod over there. So the moon, when it's in the sign of Cancer, it's a place of rulership. When it's in the sign of Taurus, it's exalted. When it's in the sign of Capricorn, it's in fall. And when it's in, detriment in Capricorn and fall in Scorpio. The sephiroth, which I said already, is Yesod. That's the number 9 is the number attributed. That's the 9th sephiroth. So now we get into what I talked about, that, you know, when you get into a greater invocation and you get to the point where you're calling forth the angels, or you don't have to call forth angels. There's plenty of other things to do. But I have them listed in the order I would call them, starting with the God name, which is Shaddai El-Kai, the archangel of Monday, of the moon, Gabriel, meaning strength of God. The choir of angels I would call next, the cherubim. The heaven, Levana, and I will add a El, Aleph Lamed at the end when calling those spheres, those heavens. Precious stones, plants, incense, metals I always try to bring into every working, so to have them on the altar, to have the plants on your altar, to have that incense burning, to have anything silver on your altar, your cup, your chalice or cup, if you have one on your altar, that being silver in itself is a plus. And then I put the queen scale on there. I didn't put the other scales, but anytime you can get maybe candles that color, a altar cloth. Once you start making talismans for these planets, you want a good idea is to bring these color scales into your talismans. The Greek deities is Hecate and Artemis, and there's also listed in 777 Egyptian, Roman, all different deities attributed to that. On average, the moon stays in each sign for only 2 to 2.5 days. It moves really, really fast, so you really got to jump on the opportunity when you find it in a place, because it's not going to be there very long. I want to point out early that the 4 archangels intoned during the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram are also the archangels for Monday, Gabriel the moon. Wednesday will be Michael, Mercury. Friday for Venus is Oriel, and Sunday is Raphael. So Wednesday.
Skip Tuesday.
Oh. No, I'm going up the tree in order.
Oh.
So now we go to the next sephiroth, Hod, and the planet attributed to that is Mercury. And that's the day of Wednesday. So you see, I don't think I necessarily have to read through all that anymore. Y'all could see that. Now, for the most part, I would suggest working with these 4 lower sephiroth before going above the tree, and really build that foundation with those 4 archangels. Once you get it, let's say you feel like though you haven't went through a satisfactory cycle with that, and you start to learn about placements, and you see Jupiter, for instance, the planet of greater fortune, is just in an amazing place. It's like, that's an opportunity you really want to jump upon. So there are times that I think it's okay to kind of take a chance and go a little bit further than maybe you have already. Now, Raphael, you see how Michael is listed as the archangel for this day. Raphael and Michael are both attributed to Mercury and the Sun in different grimoires. So I do encourage everyone to experiment with them both if they embark upon this. I have had great results working with Raphael on both Wednesdays and Sundays. Raphael, I'd like to bring up that is a main character in the book of Tobit. It's a great book to read, to learn about, that archangel. It's a book from the Old Testament that just didn't make the cut. In it, he heals with the gallbladder of a fish. That fish oftentimes gets attributed to Mercury. In 1 Enoch 10, God commands and specifically tasks the archangel Raphael to bind Azazel, which means scapegoat. Also, when doing a Mercury working on a Wednesday, being that I'm a Thelemite, it's a really good time to bring Liber Israfel into the mix. It's a ritual in Class B, using that as a preliminary invocation, maybe before it, maybe after you called all the energies. Anywhere you really want to place it in, it's just great to do. So now we go to the next sephiroth up the tree. The planet attributed to that is Venus. That is Friday. So Venus' rulership is in Taurus and Libra. It is exalted when it's in the sign of Pisces. It is in fall when it's in Virgo, and detriment in Scorpio and Aries. The name of the sephiroth is Netzach, the number 7. The God name is Yahweh Zavaoth, or Yehovah Zavaoth. I tend to say Yahweh. The archangel is Uriel, which means fire of God. You'll also see Anael attributed to this day, and that's okay if you want to call Hanael or Anael, however you want to pronounce it. The choir is Elohim. The heaven is Noga, or Nogael. Precious stone, the emerald. Plants, the rose. Incense, benzoin, rose, red sandal. The metal, copper, color emerald. For the queen scale, Aphrodite is the Greek deity. On average, Venus stays in a sign for 23 days to 2 months, or would only go up to 2 months if it was in retrograde, which happens. In the Old Testament story of Jacob wrestling with God, Genesis 22, chapter 22, verse 22 to 32, Uriel is one of the angels referred to as having wrestled with Jacob. In the Magus by Francis Barrett, it also claims that alchemy was brought down to earth by Uriel, and that Uriel gave Kabbalah to man. Metatron is also an angel that has been said to do these things. So you'll see that a lot of these angels are said to do the same things. So,
were they punished?
I think they have dissociative identity disorder.
We also learn in John Dee's 5 Books of Mystery that Uriel was the first angel that appeared and began to communicate to Edward Kelly during Kelly and Dee's first ritual together. It was Kelly's first scrying session with John Dee, and going into it, they were expecting to contact the angel Encore. The next angels that communicated to Kelly the scryer and Dee the conjurer in particular order were Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Salomia. One place you'll come across the name Salomia is in the Heptameron by Abano, conjuration of Sunday. I don't think personally enough attention is given to the fact that a huge amount of information that was received by Dee and Kelly on Enochian magic came from the archangels. And personally for me, the first archangel that made themselves known to me and let me know this shit is working was Uriel.
How were you made aware that it was working?
Astrally, which I was going to get to a bit later, but I guess this is now as good as time to bring it up.
Describe your personal notes.
Doing this planetary work, it's like eventually it's going to lead to realizing, and through my many years of experience, and I've done it a lot, that you're more than just your body. and you're definitely going to start to learn about the astral and etheric body. And I had never, another thing I was going to bring up, and now was a good time to do so, when you get in these places, you want to test spirits. I don't care if it seems threatening, if it seems beautiful. You're going to figure out really fast if you can talk in these places. Can you feel? Can you smell? A human appeared basically in front of me in this astral place, and I had never tested a spirit, and I just, it was plugged in, it was pounded into my mind to do that, by one of my teachers, David Richard Jones, that when you get into this situation that you need to test these spirits. And I appeared in an airport and surrounded by people, and then all of a sudden, and it was all ivory, like glowing ivory, and just a glass window out of the airport I can see. And then and it's like this, my full consciousness set in, like, oh my God, like I'm here right now. And as soon as my full consciousness hit me, all the people disappeared, and there was someone standing behind a table, beautiful, beautiful figure, young man. And I laughed and looked at him. I said, "You are not Oriel. You're not Oriel. I'm going to test you. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Slammed his hands on the table, looked at me and said, "Love is the law, love under will." Saying, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," is a perfect way to test anything. If they respond, "Love is the law, love under will," then that's okay. If they stop halfway through it, "Love is the law," give you a confused look, now is the time to defend yourself, and I can talk about that a little bit.
Ponto said things, and if they don't turn into something else or dissolve or like hit at you,
So, next slide. Wait, I was on. Okay. So, Sunday, the day of the sun. The sun is rulership in Leo, exaltation in Aries, fall in Libra, and detriment in Aquarius. Thing about the sun, fall in Libra, detriment in Aquarius, we know that, the sun has to go through every sign. So it was taught to me that you could almost look at the sun being in Libra and Aquarius as a neutral placement when doing planetary magic. It's like when, the sun is so important, and I almost feel like that it's okay to, unless you're petitioning for certain types of gain, but if you're doing this work for, you think it's related to your great work for more than just, hey, I want this or I want that, I think it's perfectly fine to do one of these solar workings when the sun is in Libra or Aquarius. The God name is Yahweh or Yehovah Eloha Vada'af. It's a little bit longer. The archangel is Raphael. The choir is Malachim. Raphael means God has healed, which, remember the book of Tobit? Raphael. Tobit, you have Tobit and Tobias and Tobit. There's father and son. And he healed, the father was blind. And the way Raphael heals the father is with the gallbladder of the fish and rubbing it in his eyes, and he can then see. So that's why, Raphael is for health reasons. And also on a Wednesday, like if you want to do something for healing, like I would call Raphael on a Wednesday. And if you see, especially if Mercury is in Virgo, I mean, that's a big time for that health, petition.
like you would do a Mercury thing instead, because they're changed up in a lot of
hit
different
refresh, please.
grimoires, so, yeah.
A precious stone, topaz, Archangel Raphael. The choir is Malachim, which means kings. The heaven is Shemesh. Precious stone, topaz. Plants, acacia, bay, laurel, vine. Incense, frankincense. Metal, gold. color, yellow or gold. Greek deity Helios. And of course, the sun stays in each sign for an average of 30 days. The sun and the moon never go retrograde like the other planets do.
Not yet.
I'll try to speed it up a little bit.
With Mars.
Oh, well, that's a good way to speed it up, actually. So now we go, we're getting above Tiferath here to Mars. And Mars and Saturn, they're what's called malefic planets. I believe when it's especially
Malefic planet.
Yeah, the power
Speed it
goes
up.
off.
Let's
That's
start.
amazing.
It's blinked off.
Weird. Keep talking.
when we're going Mars and Saturn, I do think it's really important to know what sign they are in, avoiding greater invocations when they're in a sign of fall or detriment. At the same time, when finding Mars and Saturn in a sign of rulership or exaltation, it's time to act. It's interesting to note, though, that in the Thoth Tarot, the astrological attribution to the Five of Cups is Mars and Scorpio.
Yeah.
Furthermore, Crowley goes on to explain, Mars and Scorpio, moreover, is the attribution of the geomantic figure Rubus. This is of such evil omen that certain schools of geomancy destroy the map and postpone the question for 2 hours or more when Rubus appears in the ascendant. Its meaning is to be studied in the Handbook of Geomancy, Equinox Volume 1, Number 2. So it's one of these situations where it's like, well, it's this sign of rulership is just like a necessary part of the path, A lot of times when things go bad with people, they just want to be like, oh, this is part of my magical path. And it's really like, no, man, shit's really not together. But, there are places where that happens. One big place is a Saturn return. We all know that things catastrophic could happen that really are kind of for your own good. The astrological attribution of the Three of Discs is Mars in Capricorn. That's a place of exaltation. Of this, Crowley says it's ruled by Mars in Capricornus. He is exalted in that sign and therefore at his best. Also, I left out the Two of Wands. The astrological attribution is Mars in Aries for that. It represents will in its most exalted form. Mars in Scorpio, of course, also has its connection to ATU. Mars in Aries, of course, has its connection to a 2-4, the Emperor, and Mars in Scorpio to ATU 13, Death. So it might be possible to see now how learning one discipline can strengthen others. By starting to become proficient in planetary magic, it will start to strengthen your understanding of the tarot and astrology. Or if you've got a super knowledge of astrology, you'll be able to learn those other things faster. Like, they're all connected. There's connections to all of them. So moving on through Jupiter, I'm not going to read through all the attributions anymore because I really want to speed it up. Jupiter and Saturn take a lot longer to travel through the signs, being that they're farther out planets. Due to this, when doing planetary magic, it's important to take care of them while you're still alive because you might not get another chance to do that again. And then oftentimes, we have to settle with them being in a neutral sign because it does take them so long to get to a sign of rulership or exaltation again.
Right?
And then, you're left with just having to find a beneficial house. Once you start working with the sephiroth above Tiferath, I think it's a good idea to learn a star ruby. Obviously, before the star ruby was written, this magic was done. But as I'll briefly mention, there's ways to also use unicursal hexagrams when calling these angels. So especially if you're using those unicursal hexagrams, it might be a good idea. I found myself in a Harry Marshall place once, and the star ruby kind of saved me in that situation. That's another one you might want to hear, but I'll tell you later if you're interested.
That was the ritual.
It's at the after party.
Yeah. Saturn. So right now Saturn is in Aquarius. I think it's still in retrograde though.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah, so not a good time. But once it leaves Aquarius, it will be a very long time in human years before it enters a sign of rulership or exaltation again. It will enter the sign of Libra in September of 2039. So after leaving Aquarius, you will not get to perform a Saturn working in a sign of exaltation or rulership, or a sign of exaltation until the year 2039. This is why once you have this knowledge and you start to do this work, it's like exciting times. It's like, oh shit,
Yeah,
man,
we found another.
Saturn is in Aquarius. This is going to be a great 3 years. Interestingly enough, and I've had maybe 6-8 months ago, a year ago, I had a conversation with Chris how Saturn entering its places of rulership, going from Capricorn to Aquarius, doesn't seem like it's playing out very well for the world, but nonetheless, it's still in a sign of rulership. So I credit my immediate results from my first Saturn working to having built up a firm foundation with the lower sephiroths, calling these planetary forces, God names, archangels, and the heavens. I purposely left out, after the heavens, the next thing you would say generally is what is the intelligence and the spirit. I left out the intelligences and spirits. They're very important still. I think it's a good exercise for everyone to look them up on their own if they don't know them already. I could send them to you if you want to know. I didn't add them because if I was calling them in a ritual, I would take more precautions than the ritual layout that I use. So now, timing, precision. I don't know if most people even will stick to that do planetary magic. Are they doing it on the day of that planet? But then are they doing it during a planetary hour? Every day has 4 planetary hours.
Okay.
So this is August 20th, 2021. So planetary-wise, the day doesn't start. The day of Venus doesn't start till sunrise on Friday morning. So that's technically when the day of Venus starts. That is also the first planetary hour of the day. So on Monday, the first planetary hour of the moon is sunrise. That's when it starts. Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on. So let's say I'm getting ready, I want to do planetary magic this week. I'm going to run my planetary hours for every day of the week. And then what I'm going to do, so you have 2 daytime hours and 2 nighttime hours. During the light time of the year, your planetary hours are not always an hour long. Only during the equinoxes are they going to be perfectly balanced. So during the light time of the year, they're going to be longer than an hour, and the 2 nighttime hours of the 4 will be shorter than an hour, and then it flips. During the dark time of the year, they're longer than an hour during the nighttime hours and shorter during the daytime hours. So what you do is you cast a birth chart for each of the planetary hours of the future date. So what you see here this planetary hour being from 6:15 a.m. to 7:24 a.m., Venus is in the sign of Libra during that first sunrise hour, solar hour, first Venus hour, and it's in the second house. And if you follow this system of charting your houses, which I do, that's also a house rulership, because that's the second house. It's like called co-rulership or house rulership. So you have the planetary hour itself. It's like this double place of power to call forth that energy. And then, so being that it's in the sign of Libra and the second house, that's just like, that is a sweet spot. I can't explain to you how much of a sweet spot it is. It's like you just have to take advantage of that. So a planet posited in the sign it rules is said to be in its rulership, domicile, or home. Thus, it is able to totally fulfill its role, and it is most likely that its actions will play out positively. On the contrary, when a planet is in its opposite sign, it's said that it rules. It is said to be in detriment. Thus, its action is negative, misused, or non-existent, or weakened. When exalted, a planet is in a sign of a similar nature, but which it does not rule. It is said to be in exaltation. The planet gets strength and energy from its exaltation. Thus, its influence is positive. In fall, it is said, therefore, contrarily to the exaltation, the planet loses its strength and influence. So I went through this already, but this is kind of like the tree here. You know, if you think about it, like, I'm not saying the Earth is the center of the universe here. But when going up the tree, you know, you have like the 7 circles of heaven here. It's a good way to explain this. You're going up the tree there. So the moon, Mercury's next. And that's the same order. From here to there, to there, to there, to there, to there, to there. I had a lot of notes here that I'm missing that I wanted to say as part of what I was supposed to talk about. But
Maybe you're supposed to just first
yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, since Venus in the second house and in the 7th house are those co-house rulership places. Now, when reading Agrippa, and Chris taught me a lot about this, because that's not the 3 books of cult philosophy. It's, you know, it's not easy to find stuff in there. With medieval astrology, he did take a different take on house placements. And I was taught this method by David Richard Jones, and I kind of started rolling with it, and I started to do a lot of rituals, and it just worked. I had a lot of success. So I stuck with it, and, you know, success is my proof in that regards. So we've talked a little bit about the knowledge of planetary rulerships and dignities. We've talked a little bit about planetary timing. I don't expect you really to grasp all this today if you don't know this, but it's something I'm happy to help you figure out. It's really, this stuff might sound technical. It's really not that hard. Once you start plugging the stuff in, it just sounds like a lot of people might not even want to start to do it, because it's like, no way, man, that sounds like too much this. I want to do a ritual. I want to focus. Believe me, it's not as challenging as it seems. We've talked a little bit about correspondences. Now, what about a ritual? You know, how do you formulate a ritual here? Well, to start, you want to learn a pentagram ritual and a lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and a lesser banishing ritual of the hexagram. Once you know those 2 things, you're not very far off. These are, from Liber O, the greater hexagrams that you would use to call the planetary forces and any of those angels that I listed. I'm going to solar one, it looks a little bit tricky, right? Because it is, you know, it seemed, I was intimidated by it at first. But like for the moon up top, you're gonna invoke I have really, so you have Saturn up here, you got the moon down here, Venus is here, Mercury's here, Jupiter, Mars. So if you're going to invoke the moon, here's a, let me write out the skeleton first before you get to this part. Do without which of law, you ring your bell. We're dealing with the moon, you ring the bell 9 times. Ding, 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 ding. You do a pentagram ritual. Then you do a hexagram ritual, lesser banishing ritual of the hexagram. And then from here you can cast your circle. You could also cast a circle. That's the one thing you kind of put a lot of different places. But this would be a good place to cast your circle. And then from there you got to purify and consecrate. And then I do a preliminary invocation, first and second Enochian key. So the first key, I'll say it in English and Enochian. The second key, I'll say it in English and Enochian. And there you go, now that's it, you're ready. Like, time for the greater evocation. So I'll start with, since I'm talking about the moon,
You're going all over the place. Yeah,
Is it
it's
going on?
getting out.
So you're going to trace that lunar invoking hexagram now. This is number 1, clockwise. This is number 2, clockwise. When you're calling the God name, I'm tracing that as I'm intoning the God names. I'm calling the God name first. And then I will say Ararita as I pierce that hexagram. But you're also tracing the sigil inside. So you trace that for invoking, you draw the planetary sigil inside, then you say Ararita and pierce through it. I do each one 9 times. It's 9 sephiroth. So literally, by the end of that ritual, I'm calling the God name 9 times, the archangel 9 times, the heavens, the choir of angels 9 times, then the God name.
You say that's not necessary, it's just you get into a meditative state that you kind of like, oh, you lose yourself.
Yeah.
And trust me, bring water, because if you're doing it 9 times,
Yeah.
you're gonna...
When you're down there, you're doing it. When you get up to Saturn, you're only doing it 3 times. So
Yeah.
it's faster. But
You're tracing that hexagram each of those go rounds?
But you don't have to, that's
each
what
one
I'm
9
saying.
times. Yeah.
And
you know,
it's a good workout for the arm.
It's part of this
Yeah,
idea
that too.
of inflaming yourself with prayer, because you're trying to get out of the rational mind and open yourself to these forces. And so you're doing this so that you're consumed by those planetary energies and you basically are meshed with them.
You're just adding another symbol with the numbers. I think that's the reason behind it.
But with the sun, you know, it's like there's no sun. Where's the sun, right? Where's the sun? So
Everywhere.
everywhere.
All
So
pervading.
you trace every single one of the planetary, and when you do the sun, you're doing it 6 times now, right? And it just so happens that there's 6 points to the hexagram. So you trace every planet's, when you get to that point with the sun, you're tracing every planet's invoking hexagram in order. But the difference is the planetary sigil you're drawing in the middle then is the sun. So every single hexagram, it might look like you're tracing a Saturn invoking hexagram here, but you're then drawing the sun sigil inside of it. So, does that make any sense to anyone? Or any questions at this point?
Still talking about a certain day?
No, we're kind of hopping around. I just started with the lunar one.
Lost his notes 'cause we don't
I
have
lost my notes
Wi-Fi.
because the Wi-Fi is not hooking up
And I told
here.
him to download it, but I
You
didn't.
talk about why it might be easier to use the universal hexagram.
Good thing you bring that up, Josh, because the formula of the unicursal hexagram. It's a good thing you bring it up.
Yes. 'Cause
So-
that's the sun in it for one.
Planetary hexagrams are formulated from the point of the planet being invoked or banished. From the point of the planet being invoked or banished. The figure is said to be invoking if the line so drawn passes the Saturn point in a clockwise manner, and banishing if the line passes the Saturn point in a counterclockwise manner. Thus, to invoke Saturn, begin at the Saturn topmost point, proceed to Venus, the lower right point, and so on from Venus through Sol to Mars. From Mars to Luna, from Luna to Jupiter, from Jupiter through Sol to Mercury, and from Mercury back to Saturn. Contrawise, to banish Saturn, one begins at the Saturn point and proceeds to Mercury, lower left point, and so forth. This is from On the Formula of the Unicursal Hexagram by Frater David Richard Jones. So, unicursal hexagrams.
Need the pin? It's right there.
Oh, that's marijuana.
Don't put the permanent marker on that board. I mean,
Don't do it.
Let me pick one that.
you gotta explain the sun one
The
because
sun,
there's
yeah.
two different
since you told
points
me how awful
if
the
you,
sun was.
you take the logic.
What did I do?
Told us how awful the sun was.
Yeah, the
The sun's
sun.
the best example.
This
to use,
is super
yeah.
sketchy.
It's on the bottom of the left.
Bottom.
So, there's a couple things you can do with the sun. Obviously, you know, other planets, but with the sun, let's say you're calling the archangel Michael on a Sunday. Then you would start in the middle and go towards Mars. And when you do that, that's weird.
Yeah.
That was-
You did it.
Yep.
There it goes.
So, as you see here, like bam, 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 you're going over the top. It's really easy to think, like, when I first started tracing these, like, you think you're doing it for invoking, but you're not. But if you're calling the Archangel Michael, you go from the sun to Mars. Why? Because, you know, you think of Mars, Michael, the sword, rah, you know. And then if you were still doing that same solar working on a Sunday, but you were calling Raphael, you would start at the sun and then go to Mercury and then for your invoking.
The point
Why?
is you have
Raphael, healing, you know. In the book, the 5 Books of Mysteries, they call Raphael Medicina in Latin, means, you know, medicine. So, also, I know for a fact that C.F. Russell had a student, Frater Sapiente, and he told Frater Sapiente to apply the same logic from the Golden Dawn standard hexagram to the unicursal hexagram. So you would just do the same thing with tracing every planet and tracing the sun sigil in the center. You can do that as well. What you're going to find is there's more than one way. Once you start to learn these things, like, you know, there's more than one way to utilize these hexagrams, and it's okay to do that. I think it's just great to start with the standard Golden Dawn Earth hexagram. No reason to really start tinkering. Like, I first wanted to know this stuff is working. Like, that's really, I could read all the books and get all as technical as I want, but I want to know my magic is working, and I want results, you know? So, but from there, I would do things like, okay, the God name and the archangel, I would use a unicursal hexagram. Then for the choir, I'll use the standard Golden Dawn Earth hexagram. And then for the heaven, I'll use sometimes a elemental planetary hexagram, which I haven't even talked about, you know, from the hexagram ritual. I just don't know if we have time for that. There is also something else I wanted to show you guys about in the lesser hexagram ritual. That fire hexagram, there's a decision to make. Once you start realizing that these planetary points are on these hexagrams, you'll find little things that could be mistakes. And it's not that it's a mistake. You just, when you start to understand it, you then have a decision to make, because it's like, well, there's not one right way to do it. There's like 3 right ways to do it. So you just have to start experimenting at that point.